My name is Zainab. I am 27 years old, and for most of my life, I did not belong to myself. I was born into a world where obedience was not just expected, it was demanded, woven into every breath, every movement, every word I spoke. My father used to say, "A woman's honor is her silence." And my mother lived that silence so perfectly that I never knew if she had dreams or if they were buried long before I came into this world. Growing up, I learned quickly that questions were dangerous. Questions meant doubt, and doubt meant you were stepping too close to something forbidden, something that could cost you everything. So I learned to smile when I was told to smile, to lower my gaze when men walked into the room, to speak softly, and never linger too long on a thought that made my chest feel tight. I memorized verses. I prayed 5 times a day. I covered myself in a way that made me invisible, yet constantly watched. And still, somewhere deep inside me, there was always a quiet whisper asking something I never dared to say out loud. If Allah is merciful, why do I feel so afraid all the time? That question haunted me, in the spaces between my prayers, in the silence of the night when everyone else slept, and I stared at the ceiling, feeling like something inside me was reaching for air. But I buried it because fear was safer than truth. Fear kept me alive, and in my world, survival was obedience. I did not dream of rebellion. I did not dream of escaping. I only dreamed of peace, of a home where laughter did not feel like disobedience, where my voice did not feel like a threat. But those dreams began to fade the day my father called me into the sitting room, his voice calm, his expression unreadable, as he told me I was going to be married. I remember the way my hands trembled slightly in my lap, the way my heartbeat echoed in my ears like a warning. I did not ask who, because I knew it would not matter. I did not ask why, because I already understood. This was not a decision. It was an announcement. He told me it was an honor, a blessing, a privilege. A Saudi prince had chosen me, and everyone in the room acted as if my life had just been elevated to something sacred. But inside me, something sank, something heavy and cold, like I had just been handed a future I could not refuse, but also could not understand. My mother would not look at me that day, and that silence told me more than any words could. But she knew something, and whatever it was, she could not protect me from it. The days that followed were filled with preparations, fabrics, jewelry, instructions on how to behave, how to speak, how to exist as a wife to a man I had never met. Every detail was controlled, every moment planned, and I moved through it like someone watching her own life from a distance. The night before I left, I sat alone, staring at my reflection. My face was partially covered, but my eyes were exposed, and what I saw there frightened me, because it looked like I was already disappearing. If you are listening to me right now, maybe you understand that feeling. Maybe you have felt your voice fade, your identity shrink, your questions pushed so far down they almost disappeared. If stories like mine reach you, then maybe they can reach someone else, someone who is still trapped in silence. So if you feel it in your heart to support, to share, to let this message travel further, do it not for me, but for the ones who still believe they have no voice. Because once, that was me. And I did not know yet how much I would lose before I found it again. When I arrived at the palace, everything looked like something out of a dream. Marble floors stretched endlessly beneath my feet. Chandeliers glowed like captured stars. Servants moved quietly, like shadows, and doors opened without a sound. It was beautiful, in a way that almost felt unreal. But beneath that beauty, there was something else, something hollow, something that made the air feel heavier with each breath. My husband was distant, but polite. He spoke to me with a softness that felt practiced, like I was something fragile, something decorative, something meant to be seen, but not truly known. I told myself I could learn this life. I told myself this was my destiny. I told myself Allah had placed me here for a reason. But the nights were different. The nights stripped away the illusion and left me alone with my thoughts. In the quiet darkness, that whisper returned, louder than before, asking, "Why does this feel wrong?" I prayed longer. I recited more. I tried to drown it out with devotion. But the more I tried, the emptier I became. Until one night, something shifted. A door that was never meant to open, opened. And in that moment, everything I thought I understood about my life began to unravel. I realized that what I had entered was not a marriage. It was a cage. And I was only beginning to see its bars. In the wedding was everything they said it would be, and nothing they warned me about. Gold covered every surface, from the bracelets that weighed down my wrists to the embroidery stitched into my dress like threads of sunlight. Women surrounded me, adjusting my veil, whispering prayers, reminding me to be grateful, reminding me that this was an honor few could ever dream of. I remember the scent of oud filling the air, thick and suffocating, as if even the atmosphere demanded I accept this fate without hesitation. When I walked into the grand hall, all eyes were on me, yet I felt invisible, like I was watching another woman step into a life that was not hers. My husband stood at the front, composed and distant, a man of power and control, his expression unreadable as I was handed over to him like something valuable, something owned. He did not smile when he looked at me, not truly. And in that moment, something inside me trembled. But I forced it down, convincing myself that love was not required, only obedience. The ceremony passed in a blur of voices and recitations, words I had heard my entire life, but never truly felt. And when it was over, I was no longer Zainab the daughter. I was Zainab the wife, bound to a man I barely knew, in a place far from everything familiar. The palace welcomed me with silence, a kind of silence that felt heavy, intentional, as though it was hiding something beneath its polished floors and towering walls. Servants moved around me with lowered eyes, never speaking unless spoken to. And even then, their voices were barely above a whisper. My husband showed me my room, large and beautifully decorated, just yet cold in a way that no amount of luxury could disguise. "You will be comfortable here," he said, his tone polite but detached, as if he were assigning a space rather than offering a home. I nodded, because that was what I had been trained to do, to accept without question, to respond without resistance. The first night passed quietly, almost too quietly, and I allowed myself to believe that maybe this life would not be as heavy as it felt. Maybe I could adjust. Maybe I could survive this. But comfort is often the calm before truth reveals itself. It was a few nights later when I began to notice things that did not make sense. Doors opening at unusual hours, footsteps in the corridors that did not belong to servants, conversations that stopped the moment I entered a room. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was simply adjusting to a new environment, that my mind was creating fears where none existed. But the feeling did not leave. It grew. One evening, as I sat alone in my room, the door opened without a knock. I turned, expecting to see my husband, but instead it was his father, the king, a man whose presence alone demanded silence, whose authority was unquestioned, whose gaze felt like it could strip away every layer of protection I had. I stood quickly, lowering my eyes, my heart pounding in confusion. "Peace be upon you," I said softly, unsure of why he was there. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a slow, deliberate motion that sent a chill down my spine. "And upon you," he replied, his voice calm, almost gentle. But there was something beneath it, something that made my skin tighten. He looked at me in a way that felt wrong, in a way I could not explain. And for a moment, I told myself I was misunderstanding, that this was simply a cultural difference, a gesture of authority, nothing more. But then he stepped closer. "You are adjusting well?" he asked, his eyes never leaving mine. "Yes," I answered, my voice barely steady, though my instincts were beginning to scream something I did not want to hear. He nodded slowly, as if considering something, and then he said words that I will never forget. "In this house, you must learn to please more than one authority." I felt the ground beneath me shift. My mind struggled to understand, to reject, to reinterpret what he meant. But the way he looked at me made it impossible to pretend. I am married to your son," I whispered, hoping that saying it aloud would restore some sense of reality, some boundary that could not be crossed. He smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was something else, something cold. "You are part of this family now," he said. "And in this family, we share what belongs to us." My breath caught in my throat, my heart racing as the truth began to settle in, heavy and suffocating. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a mistake. This was something that had been decided long before I ever stepped into this palace. I wanted to run, but my feet would not move. I wanted to scream, but my voice would not come. I wanted to pray, to call out to Allah, to ask for protection, for intervention, for anything that could stop what I now realized was inevitable. But as I stood there, frozen, all I felt was silence, and a silence that echoed louder than any answer. And in that moment, something inside my faith cracked, just slightly, just enough for a question to slip through. If Allah sees everything, why is He not stopping this? The first time it happened, I told myself it would be the last. I told myself there must be some explanation, some hidden rule I had never been taught, something that would make it make sense if I just endured it quietly enough. But days turned into nights, and nights into something I began to fear long before the sun disappeared. What I thought was an exception became a pattern, and what I hoped was confusion became a reality I could no longer deny. I was not a wife in that palace. I was something else, something shared, something controlled, something that had no voice and no escape. I learned to separate my body from my mind, to exist in moments without truly being present, to let time pass over me like I was no longer part of it. There were times I would sit alone afterward, staring at my hands, wondering how they still belonged to me when everything else felt taken. I remembered the lessons from my childhood, the ones that said, Allah sees everything, that He is just, that He protects the al-Mu'minin, the believers. I repeated those words in my mind like a desperate attempt to anchor myself to something stable, something true. But the more I repeated them, the more hollow they sounded. If He sees everything, then He sees me. If He is just, then why does this continue? If He protects, then why do I feel so completely abandoned? I began to pray more, longer, harder, pressing my forehead into the ground until it hurt. Whispering through tears I tried to hide even from myself. Ya Allah, please, make this stop. Please see me. But the only answer I ever received was silence. A silence that grew heavier each day, pressing down on my chest until breathing itself felt like an effort. I stopped recognizing myself. The girl who once dreamed of peace was gone, replaced by someone who measured time by survival, by how many hours remained before night returned. Sometimes I would hear laughter in the halls, distant and careless, and it felt like it belonged to a different world, a world I had been erased from. I started avoiding mirrors because I could not bear to look at the emptiness in my own eyes. It was easier to pretend I was invisible than to face what I had become. And yet, Even in that emptiness, something inside me refused to completely die. I had a question. A quiet, persistent question that would not disappear no matter how much I tried to bury it. I remembered being told that doubt was from Shaitan, that questioning was weakness, that faith meant submission without hesitation. But what if submission was what led me here? What if obedience was the very thing that allowed this to happen? Those thoughts terrified me more than anything else because they felt like betrayal, not just of my faith, but of everything I had been taught to believe about myself, about God, about truth. Still, the questions grew louder. One afternoon, when I was left alone with access to a device that had been carelessly forgotten, I hesitated for a long time before touching it. My heart pounded as if I was about to commit a crime, something forbidden, something that could destroy me if I was caught. But something inside me pushed forward. I opened the browser with trembling fingers and typed words I never thought I would dare to search. Why does Allah allow suffering? I stared at the screen, expecting fear to overwhelm me, expecting guilt to force me to close it immediately. But instead, I felt something else. Curiosity, desperation, a need for answers that outweighed the fear of consequences. I read quietly, quickly, my eyes scanning through different perspectives, different interpretations, contradictions I had never allowed myself to see before. Some answers felt empty, repeating what I had already been told. Others, they raised more questions. Questions about justice, about mercy, about truth. My heart raced as I realized that what I had been taught as absolute might not be as unshakable as I believed. So I closed the device quickly when I heard footsteps, my hands shaking as I tried to return everything to how it was, my breath uneven as fear rushed back in. If they knew what I was doing, what I was thinking, it would not just be punishment. It would be destruction. But something had already changed. Once a question is asked, it cannot be unasked. Once a crack forms, it cannot be unseen. That night, as I lay in bed staring into the darkness, I did not pray the same way. The words felt distant, disconnected, like they no longer reached the place inside me that was breaking. And for the first time in my life, I did something I never thought I would do. I spoke into the silence without certainty, without structure, without knowing who or what might hear me. My voice was barely a whisper, fragile and uncertain, but it carried a weight I could not ignore. If you're real, why are you silent? After that night, something inside me refused to go back to sleep. The question I had whispered into the darkness lingered, echoing in my mind even during the day, even when I tried to distract myself with routine, with silence, with forced obedience. It was no longer just a thought. It was a hunger, a quiet, dangerous hunger for truth, no matter what it cost me. I became more careful, more observant. I watched the patterns of the house, the movements of the servants, the hours when the corridors were empty and the doors remained closed. I learned when I could be alone without being noticed, when I could risk even a moment of curiosity without drawing suspicion. Because now, curiosity felt like rebellion. And rebellion, in that place, was something you paid for. One afternoon, when the palace was unusually quiet, I found myself alone again, with access to a device. My fingers hesitated above the screen, my heart already racing, as if it knew the risk I was about to take. I told myself I should walk away. I told myself this was how it begins, how people lose everything. But then, that question returned, louder than fear. If truth exists, why am I not allowed to see it? I opened the browser again, but this time, my search was different, slower, more intentional. I typed words I had never allowed myself to even think before. Who is Jesus? For a moment, I froze, staring at the screen as if lightning might strike me for even asking. But nothing happened. No punishment, no immediate consequence, just words appearing in front of me, waiting to be read. I clicked on one of the results, my breath shallow as I began to read. At first, it felt strange, unfamiliar. But then something shifted. The way Jesus was described. It was not like anything I had known. He was not distant. He was not described as someone to be feared into obedience. He spoke of love, of forgiveness, of knowing people, not just commanding them. I kept reading, unable to stop, my eyes moving faster, my heart beating harder with every line. There was something about it that felt alive. Like the words were not just information, but something reaching toward me. Something I could feel in a way I could not explain. Days passed, and I became more desperate for those moments alone. I searched quietly, carefully, clearing everything afterward, making sure no trace remained. I found myself comparing what I had always believed with what I was now discovering, and the differences unsettled me in ways I could not ignore. One spoke of submission without question. The other spoke of relationship, of knowing, of being known. One filled me with fear. The other made something inside me soften, even when I tried to resist it. Eventually, I did something that terrified me more than anything else I had done so far. I installed a Bible app. My hands trembled as I watched it download, every second feeling like it could be interrupted, like someone could walk in and see everything, like this small act could destroy me completely. When it finished, I stared at the icon for a long time before opening it. And when I did not know where to begin. So I just tapped on a random passage. The words appeared on the screen, this simple, clear, and yet they carried a weight I was not prepared for. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. I read it again, and again. My chest tightened, but not in fear. In something else, something unfamiliar. It felt like the words were speaking directly to me, like they understood something about me that no one else ever had. Weary, burdened. Those were words I had never said out loud, but they described me perfectly. I did not realize I was crying until tears fell onto the screen, blurring the words I could not stop reading. I quickly wiped them away, panic rushing back as I remembered where I was, what I was risking, what would happen if anyone found out. I closed the app, my hands shaking, my breathing uneven. For the rest of the day, I moved like a shadow, as afraid that somehow my thoughts were visible, that my curiosity had already exposed me. Every sound made me tense. Every glance felt like suspicion. That night, I lay in bed, staring into the darkness, but this time, the silence felt different. It was not empty. It was waiting. The words I had read replayed in my mind over and over, refusing to fade. Come to me. I did not know what it meant. I did not know what I was doing. But I knew something had shifted inside me in a way I could not undo. And then, just as I began to drift into an uneasy sleep, I heard something. Footsteps. Slowing near my door. My body tensed instantly, my breath catching as I stared toward the entrance, every part of me frozen. The handle moved slightly. And in that moment, one thought echoed louder than all the others. Did they find out that night did not end the way I expected it to? The handle moved, paused, and then nothing. The footsteps faded, leaving me frozen in the darkness, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain it could be heard through the walls. I did not sleep after that. I lay there, staring into the silence, my body tense, my mind racing with fear, questions, and something else I could not yet name. By morning, Exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. But there was no rest for me. There never was. The day moved like every other, controlled, quiet, suffocating. But something inside me felt closer to the surface, like everything I had been holding in was about to break. And it did. It happened later that night, after another moment that left me feeling completely shattered, completely emptied of whatever strength I thought I still had. Because I remember sitting on the floor after, my back against the cold wall, my hands trembling in my lap as I tried to breathe, as I tried to understand how I was still alive, how this was still my life. Something inside me gave way in that moment. Not just pain, not just fear, something deeper. I stopped trying to be strong. I stopped trying to hold everything together. I buried my face in my hands, and for the first time, I cried without holding back, without trying to be silent, without caring who might hear me. I can't do this anymore, I whispered through broken breaths. I can't. I did not call on Allah this time. The words would not come. Instead, I spoke into the emptiness, not even knowing who I was speaking to. If there is anyone, if you are real, please, help me. My voice faded into the quiet, and I sat there, waiting, though I did not know what I was waiting for. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me into sleep, not gently, but like I had fallen into something deep and endless. And that was when it happened. At first, it felt like a dream I could not fully understand. I was standing in a place I had never seen before, yet it felt familiar, like something my soul recognized even if my mind did not. There was light all around me, not harsh, not blinding, but soft and warm, like it was alive. I looked down at myself, expecting to feel the same heaviness I always carried, but it was gone, completely gone. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt light, free. And then I saw him. He stood a short distance away, dressed in white. But it was not just the clothing that caught my attention. It was him. Everything about him felt different. Okay? There was a peace in his presence that I had never known. A quiet authority that did not demand fear, but inspired something else. Something that felt like safety. I could not see every detail of his face clearly, but I did not need to. Somehow, I knew. My heart recognized him before my mind could form the thought. He began to walk toward me, slowly, gently, and with every step, I felt something inside me respond, like I had been waiting for this moment my entire life, without realizing it. I wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand who he was and why he was there, but no words came. I could only stand there, trembling, not in fear, but in something deeper. When he was close enough, he stopped, looking directly at me, and in that moment, I felt completely seen. Not the version of me the world had shaped, not the silence I had learned to wear, but me. Every broken piece, every hidden tear, every question I had buried. He saw all of it. And still, there was no judgment in his eyes, only compassion, only love. He spoke, and his voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was gentle, yet it carried a weight that settled deep into my soul. Zainab, he said. My name. The way he said it. It was as if he had always known me, as if I had never been forgotten. Tears filled my eyes instantly, though I did not feel ashamed of them. I see you, he continued. You are not forgotten. Something inside me broke completely at those words. But this time, it was not pain. It was release. The kind of release that comes when you realize you have been carrying something for too long, something you were never meant to carry alone. I wanted to reach out, to move closer, to stay in that moment forever. But as quickly as it had begun, everything started to fade. The light softened, the space around me dissolved, and I felt myself being pulled back, away from him, away from the peace I had just touched. "Wait," I tried to say, my voice desperate, but no sound came. And then I woke up. My eyes opened to the same room, the same walls, the same reality I had never been able to escape. But something was different. My heart was racing, my body trembling, but not with fear, with something I could not fully understand. I sat up slowly, my mind trying to make sense of what I had just experienced. It felt too real to be just a dream, too powerful, too personal. I placed a hand over my chest, feeling my heartbeat steadying, and for the first time in a long time, I did not feel empty. I felt seen. The words echoed in my mind, clear and undeniable. "I see you. You are not forgotten." I had spent so long believing I was invisible, that my pain existed in a silence no one could hear. But now I was not so sure. I whispered into the quiet, my voice barely audible, but filled with something new. Something fragile, yet undeniable. Was that Jesus? I could not stop thinking about it. Not for a moment. Not in the silence of the palace. Not while I moved through the routines of a life that still felt like it belonged to someone else. The words from the dream followed me like a shadow that would not leave. "I see you. You are not forgotten." I kept repeating them in my mind, as if saying them enough times would prove they were not imagined, not just a product of exhaustion or pain or desperation. But deep down, I knew something had changed, something irreversible. I began searching again, but this time it was different. It was not curiosity anymore. It was urgency. I needed to understand what I saw, who he was, why his presence felt more real than anything I had ever known in my life. Every chance I got, I returned to that hidden world on my device, reading carefully, quietly, as if even my thoughts could be overheard. I searched about Jesus, about his life, about his words, about what people said he came to do. And the more I read, the more something inside me began to soften in ways I did not know were possible anymore. I had grown up believing that faith meant fear, that closeness to God meant constant caution, that love and mercy always came with conditions. But what I was reading now spoke differently. It spoke of a love that pursued people, not punished them. A love that saw suffering and did not turn away. A love that called the broken, not the perfect. I remember sitting alone one afternoon, my hands trembling slightly as I read a verse I had never seen before. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I froze. The same words, the same invitation. It was like something was reaching across everything I had ever known and speaking directly into the place I had kept hidden, even from myself. Weary, burdened. Those words did not just describe my life. They described my soul. And for the first time, instead of feeling fear when I thought about God, I felt something else. Longing. But with that longing came terror, because I knew what it meant to even think this way. I knew what would happen if anyone discovered what I was reading, what I was feeling, what I was beginning to believe. I would not just lose my place in the palace, I would lose everything. My family, my name, my safety, my identity. I would become nothing in their eyes. Worse than nothing. I would become someone who betrayed everything I was born into. That thought alone made my hands shake so violently, I had to close the device and press my back against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. "This is dangerous," I whispered to myself. "This is wrong." But even as I said it, my heart refused to agree. Because what I felt, reading those words, was not darkness. It was not confusion. It was not deception. It felt like light. Pure, gentle, unwavering light. Days passed like that. a battle inside me I could not speak aloud. By day, I lived carefully, pretending nothing had changed. By night, I searched again, always returning to the same voice, the same message, the same presence I could not forget. And slowly, something began to happen inside me. The fear did not disappear, but it stopped being the loudest voice. One night, after everything had gone quiet, I found myself unable to stop crying again. Not from pain this time, from confusion, from pressure, from the weight of standing between two worlds I did not know how to reconcile. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands covering my face, my shoulders shaking as everything inside me collapsed into one moment. I don't know what to believe anymore, I whispered into the darkness. I don't know what is true. My voice cracked as I lowered my hands. But if you are real, if you are bammed real, I don't want to live in fear anymore. The words came out before I could stop them. Jesus, if you are who I saw, I need you. The silence after that felt different, not empty, not cold. It felt like something had been heard, even if nothing around me changed. I did not see anything. I did not hear a voice. But inside me, something settled. A small, fragile surrender I did not fully understand. The next morning, I woke up exhausted, as if I had fought a war in my sleep. Nothing outside had changed. The palace was still the same. The rules were still the same. The danger was still there. But inside me, something had shifted. I moved through the day with a strange awareness, like I was no longer fully trapped in the same way I had been before. Like something inside me had begun to separate from fear. I still did not know what I was becoming. I still did not know what would happen if they found out. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was no longer just surviving. I was searching. And somewhere deep inside that search, I was no longer alone. It did not stay hidden for long. I wish I could say I was careful enough, that I was disciplined enough to keep everything buried. But truth has a way of leaving traces, even when you think you've erased them completely. It started with small changes. My silence felt different, my reaction slower, my eyes lingering too long when certain names were mentioned. My husband noticed first. He always noticed everything. One evening, he stood at the door of my room longer than usual, watching me without speaking. "Hi, you are distant," he said finally, his voice calm but sharp underneath. I forced myself to look normal, to respond the way I had been trained to respond. "I'm just tired," I said. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. From that moment, I felt it shift. The air in the palace became heavier, not physically, but emotionally, like something was closing in around me. I began deleting everything more carefully, praying no trace remained, but fear had already planted itself in their minds. The first real confrontation came at night. I was summoned, not asked. When I entered the room, my husband was there, and his father, the king. The same presence that once made me freeze now made something inside me tremble for a different reason. Not just fear, recognition of danger. "Sit," my husband said. His tone left no space for refusal. I obeyed. Silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity before his father spoke. "We have observed changes in you," he said slowly. My heart dropped, but I kept my face still. "There are no changes," I replied, though my voice felt churched, unfamiliar. My husband leaned forward slightly. "Do not lie to us." That sentence struck deeper than I expected. Not because of the words, but because of what they implied. They already knew something was wrong. Or at least, something they could not explain. The king studied me for a long moment, his gaze colder than before. "Tell us the truth," he said. "Who are you speaking to?" My breath caught. For a second, I thought they had discovered everything. The searches, the reading, the words I whispered in secret. But I forced myself to stay composed. No one, I said. The answer did not satisfy them. I could feel it. My husband stood suddenly, pacing slightly, frustration breaking through his controlled exterior. "You think we are blind?" he said. "You think we do not see when a woman begins to drift away from her place?" My stomach tightened. This was not about suspicion anymore. It was about control. "You belong here," the king said quietly, his voice firm but eerily calm. "Do not forget that." The way he said it made something inside me recoil. Not just fear, but resistance. For the first time, I did not feel like I wanted to disappear. I felt like I wanted to survive differently. The interrogation continued for what felt like hours. Questions layered over questions, pressure building, silence used as a weapon. I gave them nothing. Not because I was strong, but because I had nothing left that they could take without destroying me completely. Eventually, they dismissed me, but not with relief, with warning. "We will continue watching you," my husband said as I turned to leave. His voice followed me like a shadow. "Do not make us correct something that does not need to be broken further." That night, I did not sleep. I sat in the darkness of my room, every sound amplified, every movement outside my door making my body tense. I knew what was coming. This was not just suspicion anymore. It was surveillance, control tightening, and I knew something else too. The moment they confirmed I was not who they thought I was, everything would change. Days passed under constant pressure. I felt eyes where there had once been indifference. Servants lingered too long. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. Even the air felt different, like the palace itself was preparing for something. Then one morning, they came for me. Not violently, not yet, but decisively. 2 guards stood outside my door. "You are to come with us," one of them said. No explanation, no emotion. My heart began to race, but I forced myself to move calmly, because panic was no longer an option. I was brought into a smaller room I had never seen before. There, my husband waited, and beside him, a man I recognized immediately from religious gatherings I had once been forced to attend, an imam. My stomach dropped. This was no longer private suspicion. This was an intervention. My husband did not sit. He stood, arms crossed, watching me as if I had already failed something irreversible. "We will correct this," he said. So my blood ran cold. The imam opened a book in front of him, speaking gently at first, quoting verses, explaining obedience, reminding me of fear, of consequences, of punishment. His voice was calm, almost soothing, but every word was a tightening chain. I listened silently, my hands clenched in my lap, my mind racing. Then he looked directly at me. "Tell me," he said, "what doubts have entered your heart?" That was the moment I understood. This was not just about behavior. It was about belief. I could feel my husband watching me closely, waiting for a crack, a confession, anything they could use to bring me back into alignment. For a moment, I almost broke. The pressure was overwhelming. The fear of consequences, the fear of punishment, the fear of losing everything I had ever known. But then something else rose inside me. Not loud, and not dramatic, but steady. The memory of a voice saying, "I see you." I lifted my head slightly. My voice shook, but I spoke. "I have no doubts," I said. The room went still. The imam's expression tightened. My husband stepped closer. "Do not test our patience," he warned. But something had already changed in me. I was no longer just afraid. I was aware, and that awareness made everything irreversible. That night, I was not returned to my room. Instead, I was taken somewhere else. A locked space. No explanation, no timeline, just confinement. As the door closed behind me, darkness swallowing the room, I realized the truth. This was no longer suspicion. This was containment. And I was no longer being watched. I was being prepared for breaking. The room they kept me in had no comfort left in it, no warmth, no sense of time, just walls, a silence, and the feeling that every second was meant to wear me down until I forgot who I was. I would sit on the floor for hours, my back against the cold surface, listening to footsteps outside that never came closer but never fully disappeared either. It was not just isolation, it was pressure designed to reshape me from the inside. At first, I tried to pray the way I used to. I would sit, lower my head, and move through the motions, hoping something inside me would reconnect. But even my prayers felt different now. Not because I had stopped believing in God, but because I no longer knew which version of Him I had been taught to fear. In that silence, my thoughts became louder than ever. I thought about my family, about the life I was born into, about everything I had been told was truth without question. And then I thought about the voice I had heard in my dream. I see you. You are not forgotten. That memory hurt in a different way than everything else, because it did not feel like fear. It felt like hope. Days later, they brought him to me, the Imam. This time, there was no softness in his presence, only certainty. My husband stood behind him, arms crossed, watching like a judge waiting for a confession. "We have given you time," the Imam said calmly. "Now you must choose whether you return to what you know or continue down confusion." I stayed silent. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I no longer believed silence meant surrender. He began again, speaking of obedience, of authority, of consequences that extended beyond this life. He quoted verses, layered with warnings, each one meant to pull me back into fear. My husband stepped forward. "You are destroying your place here," he said quietly, almost like he still wanted me to fix it before it was too late. I looked at both of them, and for the first time, I did not feel like a child being corrected. I felt like someone standing at the edge of something irreversible. "What you call correction," I said slowly, my voice trembling but present, "feels like fear." The Imam's expression tightened immediately. "Fear is guidance," he replied. But something inside me resisted that now. Not loudly, not violently, just firmly. I shook my head slightly. "Not this kind," I said. Silence fell heavier than before. My husband looked at me differently now. Not just disappointment, something closer to alarm, because they could see it. I was not bending anymore. The Imam closed the book in front of him. "Then you leave us no choice," he said quietly. I didn't ask what that meant. I already felt it. Over the next days, everything changed again. I was moved more frequently, guarded more closely. Conversations around me stopped when I entered rooms completely now. Even the servants avoided my eyes. I could feel the shift from correction to punishment beginning to take shape. One evening, the door opened, and I was told to stand. No explanation, just movement. I was taken through corridors I had never walked before, deeper into parts of the palace that felt older, colder, forgotten. Eventually, I was brought into a large hall. My husband was there, the king was there, and others I did not recognize. This was not private anymore. This was judgment. The king spoke first. His voice carried finality. "That you have brought shame and confusion into what was stable," he said. I felt my heart tighten, but I remained standing. "We gave you honor," he continued. "We gave you safety, and you have chosen uncertainty." I listened, but something inside me was no longer reacting the way it used to. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled me completely. My husband stepped forward. His voice was lower now, controlled but strained. "This is your last chance," he said. "Return, and everything can be restored." I looked at him. For a moment, I almost remembered who I used to be before all of this. The girl who believed silence was survival. The girl who thought obedience would keep her safe. But that girl felt far away now, not gone, but no longer in control. "I cannot return to fear," I said quietly. The words surprised even me. So the Imam stepped forward sharply. "You are calling truth fear," he said. But I shook my head. "No," I said. "I am calling what I experienced truth." That sentence changed the air in the room. I could feel it. My husband's expression hardened. The king's silence became heavier, and I realized then that I had crossed something I could not uncross. The Imam spoke again, this time more firmly. "Then you have chosen your path." No one explained what followed. I was no longer being discussed. I was being decided. I was taken out of the hall, not violently, but firmly, like something already classified. As I was led away, I heard my husband's voice behind me one last time, quieter than before. "You did not have to make it this way," he said. But I did not turn back, because something inside me already knew. The cost of speaking truth in a place built on silence is never just rejection. It is separation. That night, I was placed somewhere different again, more isolated, more final. And as the door closed, I understood something clearly for the first time. This was no longer about convincing me. It was about breaking what I had become. But what they did not understand was that something else had already taken root inside me. And it was not breaking. It was growing. The night everything changed felt quieter than all the others, and that was what made it terrifying. Not the shouting, not the confrontation, not the threats I had already grown used to, but silence. A silence that felt like something had already been decided before I even entered the room. I was taken again, this time without explanation, through corridors I now knew too well. My footsteps echoed differently, like the palace itself was watching me more closely than before. When the doors opened, I saw them all waiting. My husband, the king, the imam, and a few guards positioned along the edges of the hall. No guests, no witnesses, just judgment. My heart was beating fast, but not in panic like before. Something had shifted in me. A strange calm layered underneath the fear, like I had already crossed the point of return and was now simply walking through its consequences. "You have been given every chance," my husband said. His voice tight, controlled, but no longer patient. I looked at him, and for the first time, I did not see power. I saw strain. "This ends tonight," the king said coldly. "We will not allow disruption to continue." The imam opened a small book again. But this time, there were no long explanations, no persuasion, only final words. "Return to what you were," he said, "and everything will be restored. Refuse, and you accept the consequences." I stood in the center of the room, my hands trembling slightly, but I did not lower my gaze this time. I could feel something inside me holding steady, even as everything around me tightened. "I am not refusing you," I said quietly. "I am refusing fear." The words landed heavily in the room. My husband stepped forward immediately. "You do not understand what you are doing," he said sharply. But I did. More than ever before. I understood exactly what this was. The king raised his hand slightly, and the guards shifted. The air changed. I knew then this was no longer discussion, it was conclusion. But something deeper inside me was no longer reacting the way it used to. The fear was there, but it was no longer absolute. It no longer defined me. You speak of obedience, I said, my voice steadier now. But I have seen what it costs. The Imam's expression tightened. It costs you confusion? He replied. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. It costs me silence. It costs me my voice. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the guards seemed still. My husband's face shifted. Something between frustration and disbelief. This is not who you are, he said, almost like he was trying to remind me of myself. But I answered softly, maybe it is the first time I am becoming who I am. That was when everything broke open. The king gave a single motion, not angry, not emotional, final. The guards moved toward me. There was no dramatic struggle. No chaos, just control being enforced. My arms were taken, not violently, but firmly. I did not scream. I did not resist physically. But inside me, something rose. Not fear this time, but clarity. As they led me out, I heard my husband's voice behind me again. Stop this, he said, quieter now. Please. That word, please, hit me differently. Not because it softened me, but because it revealed something I had not seen before. He was not only angry, he was afraid of losing control, of losing order, of losing what they believed I represented. But I kept walking, because I was no longer just someone being corrected. I was someone who had already seen something beyond their system. I was taken through another passage, deeper than before, until the light from the hall disappeared completely. The door closed behind me with a final sound that did not feel like punishment alone. It felt like separation. I sat in that space for what felt like hours. No voices, no footsteps, only my breathing. And in that silence, I realized something I had never allowed myself to fully accept before. I had lost everything they said mattered. My position, my identity, my safety, my place. But I had not lost the part of me that had heard a different voice in the darkness. The memory returned again, clearer than ever. I see you. You are not forgotten. And for the first time, I believed that maybe being lost in their eyes did not mean I was lost completely. Sometime later, I heard movement outside. The door opened. But this time, something was different. There was no announcement, no escort information, just urgency. A guard stood there, his expression tense, not commanding. Now, he said quickly. Move. I did not understand, but I stood, and I followed. We moved through corridors faster than before, not toward judgment, but away from it. Away from the center of the palace, away from the hall where everything had been decided. Something was happening, something I was not prepared for. I did not know what was waiting beyond those walls. I only knew one thing as I walked. My story inside that place was ending, and whatever came next would not be decided by them anymore. The air outside felt different the moment I crossed beyond the inner corridors. It was colder, sharper, real in a way the palace had stopped feeling for a long time. I did not fully understand what was happening, only that the urgency in the guards' movements carried something unusual. Confusion had disruption, something breaking apart behind the scenes. No one spoke to me. No one explained anything. I was simply moved forward, step by step, until the heavy doors behind me closed and the sound of the palace began to fade like a life being left behind. When I finally stopped moving, I realized I was no longer inside what had become my entire world. I was outside, not free in the way I once imagined freedom, but no longer contained in the same way. The night air touched my skin, and for the first time in what felt like years, I felt something close to silence that was not fear. I stood still for a moment, unsure whether I was meant to run, to wait, or to disappear. No one stopped me when I took a step forward, then another, and then I was simply walking away. I didn't look back at first, because I was afraid that if I did, I would return, not physically, but emotionally, mentally, back into everything I had just escaped. When I finally did turn, the palace stood far behind me, massive and glowing faintly under distant lights, like a memory that no longer had power over me, but still carried weight. I did not feel victorious. I did not feel strong. I felt empty, exhausted, and strangely unprepared for a world I had not belonged to for so long. I did not know what came next. I only knew I could not go back. Days passed in fragments after that. I was taken somewhere safe, though safety felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious at first. No one controlled my movements anymore. No one dictated my silence. But freedom, I learned, is not an instant healing. It is a slow adjustment to a life where fear is no longer the language you speak every hour. I struggled with sleep. And I struggled with silence, because silence used to mean danger. I would wake up sometimes expecting doors to open without warning, expecting voices to call my name as if I belonged to someone else's authority. But slowly, something began to change. I began to breathe differently. Not because everything around me was perfect, but because I was no longer being erased while I existed. I was introduced to people I had never known before. People who did not look at me with ownership or judgment, but with something unfamiliar, care without condition. I did not understand it at first. It felt almost unreal, like another world layered on top of the one I had known. And in that new world, I was told something I had never truly believed about myself before. That I was not beyond healing. That I was not defined by what had been done to me. That I was not forgotten. Those words reopened something inside me that I thought had been sealed forever. But this time, instead of breaking me, they slowly began to rebuild me. I found myself returning again and again to the memory of that night, the dream, the voice, the presence that had felt more real than anything I had lived through in the palace. I see you. You are not forgotten. In the quiet moments of my recovery, I began to understand that those words had not been an escape from reality. They had been the beginning of a different one. I started learning about faith again, but not the fear-driven faith I had grown up with. This was something gentler, deeper, something that did not demand silence but invited honesty. I read about Jesus again and again, slowly, carefully, letting the words sit where pain used to be. And for the first time, I did not feel like I was being punished for asking questions. I felt like I was being met inside them. I did not convert in a single moment. There was no sudden transformation where everything became easy. Instead, there was a long, quiet surrender happening inside me, piece by piece, fear by fear, memory by memory. I began to pray again, but differently. Not from obligation, from need, from something honest inside me that no longer knew how to survive without speaking to God in a new way. And slowly, peace began to take root. Not because my past disappeared, but because it no longer had authority over my future. Today, when I look back, I do not see a perfect ending. I see scars, I see loss, I see a life I cannot reclaim. But I also see something I never thought I would have again. Myself. Not the version that was silenced, not the version that was controlled, but someone who survived, who questioned, who broke, and who was not abandoned in the breaking. I do not tell my story as revenge. I tell it as truth. Because there are still people sitting in silence, wondering if anyone sees them, wondering if God hears them, wondering if they are too far gone to be found. And if there is one thing I know now, it is this. I was never forgotten. I was never beyond reach. And in the darkest place I ever lived, I was seen. Jesus did not just change my belief. He changed the meaning of my suffering. He did not erase what happened to me. but He gave me a reason to keep living after it. So if you are listening to this, still trapped in fear, still questioning, still silent, know this: you are seen, you are not forgotten. And there is still hope for you, even here, even now.